Hello everyone. It's been a while since something has been posted here. Not really going to go into detail as to why, other than just simply I didn't have the account. It's a funny story. That's for another day. I am updating custom class creation video here. After some comments in the video, it became clear that some people are seeing this video and they're getting misinformation. 2 years ago when this video was posted, my DM style was a lot different. Since then, I have gained a lot more knowledge, and there's a lot of things in this video that are wrong that is going to be a learning point, and I'm just kind of updating it as what steps you need to take into consideration when creating a custom class. I'm not going to go in depth on physically building a custom class. I'm just going to talk about what you need, what tools you need, what you should be thinking about, and the overall process. So for starters, there are a few tools you need. You need a character sheet. The reason you need a character sheet is because you need to create the character to test it. Wizard of the Coast actually has a website right here that'll be in the description down below that gives you free character sheets all the way down at the bottom here. They're great character sheets. They look like this. It has all 3 pages. It contains everything and it's fillable. You can throw it into a Google Chrome. It opens up the doc. You can save it as a PDF easily. It's great. Secondly, you need dice. If you do not have dice, Storm King, or not Storm King's Thunder, my Storm King's Thunder group here is ran through Roll20. It is a tabletop simulator and it's great because you can do things like roll dice automatically. And these are for rolling stats, damage numbers, whatever it is that you need to roll. Also, you need something to write it down, create it, and make it look pretty. And homebrewery.naturalcrit is a great creation for this. It is a free program. There will also be a link down in the description that allows you to edit PDFs, and anything that you put on the left side of the screen will appear on the right side of the screen. And there's macros and things. I'm not going to go in detail with it because I'm not the best with it, but I will show you some creations on making it look really nice. With this, you're able to share it with other people. For instance, if it's really good, you can share it with the DM's Guild, which is another site in the link in the description that has a variety of Dungeons and Dragons content, of tabletop content in general. From any source, you can put stuff on there. You can put it up there for free, sell it for money, get feedback on it. It's the place to go if you're looking for content, and it's usually where people get inspiration for their content. So these are the tools that you need for creating the class. Now you actually need to figure out what it is that you want to do. The first question that you need to ask yourself is, all right, what do I want to make? Let's say you want to make a class in this instance. All right, I want to create a class. What type of class do I want to create? We're going to be focusing on a melee class because I already have one created here with the help of one of my friends who's been on this channel before. And also in response to this video where we were explaining a Death Knight. This is the Death Knight here that we're going to be going over. So when I'm talking about this class, I'm going to be referring to the Death Knight, but this applies in general because it's all the steps about it, not actually about the class. So you want to make a class. You've chosen a melee class. The first thing that you got to ask yourself is, okay, what's the theme of the class? What is the general goal that this class is going to accomplish? What makes it stand out? So for example, the Death Knight class, it's a dead person who is revived with necrotic magic that can use it to empower their magic, their abilities, their weapons to do devastating damage. These are people that would be shunned upon in cities and would scare little children. So right there, that's the theme of it. Okay, next you gotta ask, okay, now what makes it really unique? Like, why play a Death Knight when you could play a fighter? What does Death Knights have that fighters don't have? So that's what you gotta really think about next. So, the Death Knight concept, well, a fighter, they can hit stuff a lot and hit it hard. They have the ability to cast magical spells through the Eldritch Knight, and they can be a tank. Well, Death Knights, they have the ability to be a tank. They have the ability to be a melee burst damage character, or they actually can be at a range and use a variety of minions, pets, to wear down their opponent. They are dead beings, which means they share characteristics of undead, including things like radiant damage hurts them more. They have flavorful text, or they have the abilities to use stronger forms of magic, interrupting magic, healing themselves, which a fighter cannot do under normal circumstances. And then you just gotta kind of create lists of what makes your class idea unique. Because the last thing that you want is going, okay, well, why should I play your class when I can multi-class this class and this class together and get the same, if not better, result? The idea of creating a homebrew class is to eliminate the need to multi-class. That way you don't hinder yourself by having to multi-class, which can slow down a character's spike, but you also provide something that is significantly stronger for what you're aiming for. In the end of the day, you don't want to create something that's so overpowered that everyone wants to be it. You want something that gives reason for one or two people being like, yeah, this is what I am. And it takes a very long time. It's not something that happens in a couple hours. The longer you spend creating it, the better it will be. The more people that edit it for you, the better it will be, especially if they are also dungeon masters. So you have your tools. You have your character sheets, you have Roll20, you have home brewery, you have the general theme of your class. You have what makes it unique. Now what? Well, now you actually need to start thinking of what your class can do. So generally, describe what your class is. Any requirements for the class if it needs. Do they have a system that other classes don't have? For instance, does your class have something like Rage that a barbarian has? Does your class use spells such as a wizard, sorcerer, warlock? Does your class need a book to do anything like a wizard would? Does your class take aspects from nature like a druid does? Those types of things. Something that it's like a resource or something that helps impact the character's usefulness, really separates them from the other classes. General good idea is to give a quick building option like, okay, this is the class's main stats. This is what everything kind of scales around, and when you roll ability scores, this is what you should aim for. Quick build type thing, but that's just if other people are planning to use it. Next, you need to actually make your level chart. Level 1 to 20 is the official levels for 5th edition. If you go 21 onward, that's all homebrewed, at which point it's for a different subject. So you have level 1 to 20, where you gotta consider, all right, what ability should I get? You should never stray away from the chart from other classes. So what I mean by that is every 4th, 8th, 11th, 12th, 16th, 17th level, you get ability score improvements. These are things that increase your ability score by either 1 by 2, 2 by 1. Or the option of, instead of taking ability score improvement, your character takes a feat. Always keep those the same and don't add anything else to it. So don't, oh, this person at 4th level gains an extra attack and ability score improvement, because that's immediately very overpowered. It doesn't add to the uniqueness of the class. It just, okay, well, this class at 4th level gets +2 to strength and can do an extra attack. Like, whoa, yeah, screw being a fighter, I'm being this guy because I can do a lot more damage sooner. So keep those generally the same. Same thing goes when it comes to the archetype selection. Now you can stray away from this, like this class right here does stray away from that, but generally it's you start it at 3rd level, and it's about every 3 or 4 levels afterwards that you gain a new archetype. So for instance, I'm looking at the fighter right here. They get a martial archetype at 3rd level, at 7th level, at 10th level, at 15th level, and 18th level. You want to keep that around the same because that also balances out with the rest of the classes. That way everyone gets the same, generally the same thing at the same time. Everyone gets ability score improvements at the same time. Everyone gets a new archetype feature at the same time. This keeps the default class balanced before you've even gone into what your abilities do. And once again, just like this, you want to refrain from giving abilities with your archetype features, but if you do, it just means that you're going to have to balance it a lot more. As you can see with the Death Knight here, the level 6 gets a archetype feature and an ability, but the ability is not as impactful and it didn't really fit anywhere else. That's a judgment thing. You could have easily moved the Death Strike to level 7, and us choosing not to may be something that needs to fix. Which with balancing, people could go, well, I think Death Strike should be at level 7, and then you can turn it to be from level 7. You also want to keep proficiencies the same straight across the board. And the Wizard's book clearly lays it out. First level to 4th level, +2. 5th to 8th, +3, so on. You don't want to change those because then also, once again, that's another, just like changing or giving a spell with the ability score improvement, that all of a sudden makes it super strong without even getting to what their abilities actually do yet, and you want to refrain from doing that. So you go through and you get that general stuff. So now you got to brainstorm what kind of abilities you want. So like, what is your class accomplishing? Do they have the ability to empower their melee strikes? Do they have movement abilities, capability of healing themselves and others, etc. Brainstorming what you want them to do, so that way they are eye-catching. You don't need to worry about flavorful text, obviously, until the end, because that doesn't impact the functionality of the class. So once you've come up with the abilities you want, you generally want to give each level 1 to 2 abilities. And if it's a spellcasting class, you also want to follow spellcasting aspects of, you don't want to give them so many spell slots and so many spells known. You kind of want to scale it out where every level you get maybe 1 or 2, and maybe you hit a power spike where you get 3 of something, or the next level spell available. So once you get your list through that, you need to actually sit down and think about the class features. And this being hit points, proficiencies, and equipment. So what's the hit dice of the person? You want to generally base this around, you would have an idea of a class similar to this. So 1d10, you're looking at maybe a fighter. You're basing off as, a different type of fighter that has much more significance in your opinion. You want to keep it as it would be in the book. So you don't want to give someone a 1d20 per Death Knight level for hit dice. That's absurd. It's very strong. But if we keep it at 1d10, it's once again making that balance across the board of same with everyone else. Your hit points at first level, you always stick with Constitution. Constitution is the stat for healthiness. Your general well-being of a character is based off Constitution. So your hit points at first level, you are basing that off of your hit dice average, which in this case is 6 for a d10. And then at higher levels, you always want to be the dice of your hit dice plus your Constitution's modifier. And it's always nice if you add in that average of 6, so that way instead of rolling, you can just choose 6 with the Constitution modifier, which gives players some options. Do they want to risk getting a 7 to 10 or possibly a 2, or do they want to just go with the default 6 hit points? Because not everyone has modifiers in Constitution. Some people have like negatives in Constitution, which could greatly affect. With proficiencies, you're covering armor, weapons, tools, the type of armor that your person can wear. So if they're a melee wielder, you gotta think, okay, well, are they going to be in the front line like tanking, doing damage? Are they like based off of a rogue who wears mainly leather to be a little bit more nimble? Or are they someone like a paladin who generally wears heavier armor to take more hits? Lots of classes, a few classes have the all armor aspect, and lots of classes eventually just generally get it because it's good to have. However, you generally will keep this with light armor, medium armor, or heavy armor, depending on what you think the class is better off using. And the same thing applies with weapons. Simple weapons, martial weapons, simple melee, simple range, martial melee, martial range. But giving, or just specific weapons like longsword, dagger, clubs, or all weapons, you gotta really decide how proficient with the weapons would this class be. So like a fighter, they are very proficient with melee weapons. but they are also pretty proficient with ranged weapons. Thus, they have the capability of using martial weapons, being proficient in martial weapons, being martial melee weapons and martial ranged weapons. But they don't generally use simple weapons, so they are actually less proficient, not proficient at all, using simple weapons like a club versus a martial weapon. And then tools are based off of like smithing kits, sewing kits, something like tinker's kits, little things that can be used in the world but generally aren't used. This can also fit in with musical instruments like a bard. Then you cover their saving throws and their skills. You also want to be basing this off classes that are around the same, so like basing off the fighter. This melee class who has the capability of tank, strength, and constitution are going to be very good for them. They need to overpower and survive. So when they need to make saving throws, strength and constitution makes sense. And then you also got to choose some skills. Now you don't want to give them an abundant amount of skills. 3, 4 is usually the cap that people go with. It's enough so that way they have options, and you give them a list, 8 maybe 10. Really, it doesn't matter how many you choose. It's just more options where they can choose skills that their character can become proficient in. So maybe they're proficient in acrobatics, but they are not proficient in insight. So they can jump over a gap very well, but they can't notice that there was a bridge 5 feet to their left. Then you want to go over the equipment. Equipment always covers weapons, armor, and a type of pack like Explorer's, Dungeoneer's pack. Maybe it gives them a symbol if they're a class like a Paladin or a Cleric who uses a symbol. And these are starting items that get them out of the door at level 1. Because unless their DM gives them something at the beginning, like a lot of gold or something to buy extra stuff, this is a default. You start with this. So now you've got the tools for your class, you got your theme of the class, you got what makes it unique, justification of why it exists, you talked about what it can do, what its purpose is, you've developed its level chart, you got a general idea of what its abilities are going to do, and you have its class features. So next you are going to balance it. So you always want to start with your natural abilities first. These are abilities that don't come in archetypes. So like your sense magic, you want to balance sense magic because it doesn't matter what path you go on at third level, you're going to have this ability. It's across the board ability. So you gotta start thinking, all right, at this level, does it make sense? Yes, okay. What does it do? In this case, this basically it's like a detect magic. It gives you a bonus to investigation checks, and when you're trying to specifically see disguises. So it has a specific bonus to it. Is if you have a feeling someone has a disguise on you, you have an advantage to it. But let's say it's a damaging ability like the Death Strike here. So okay, 6th level, you have this ability. What does it do? It's a attack that can heal you. Okay, well, how much damage does it do? Do you make it do weapon damage, which could vary, or do you give it a default? It does 2d8. In this case, a weapon attack was the best decision because you're using your weapon to do something with the combined force of magic to get a result. So you decide that it's going to do the weapon attack damage. So whatever weapon your character is using, that's what it's going to do. It costs an action to use, not a bonus action, because it is a type of attack. So it replaces your attack action with this ability. And you put some form of cost on it. Some classes have this, like spellcasters. Their spells take a spell slot. In this case, this class uses runes, and they only have a certain amount of runes depending on their weapon to cast this ability. So they have a requirement on it that they have to strategize depending on how many they have. And the end result is, along with the damage you deal, you heal for 2/3 of the damage dealt, which can vary. Do you use a D12 weapon and you hit them for 12 damage? Well, you get 2/3 of 12. Or perhaps you rolled a 1 and you you don't get healed because you can't get healed in decimals. In a decimal, that's just not a thing. It has to be a flat out number of, well, is it 5? Is it 3? And your choice around up or down is always on the dungeon master. I personally round up, but I know people who round down. And you want to do this for every single ability. So you've gone through and you have, with every natural ability, you've determined, all right, it's good. Now send it to someone else. So you send it to your friend. Hey, buddy, does Mind Freeze sound good to you? Like, what do you think of it? Buddy points out, oh, well, you have this 1 rune cost on it, and it could be used 3 times. But, you know, what if your class gets very lucky and re-rolls 3 runes every single turn? It doesn't really impactful. Maybe making it 2 runes would put more of a cost on it. Because now you can only use it 3 times a day or 3 times per long rest. So if it costs 2 runes, that adds extra thinking required with it. Like, yes, I could stop that fireball, but if this is my last mind freeze of the day, like, do I really want to use it? It costs 2 runes and it's my last one. It adds a little bit more strategy, and then you can go, all right, you write it down, go to another person, do the same thing. Next person is, hey, what do you think of this? Buddy here suggested this with Mind Freeze. Maybe that buddy goes, yeah, I agree. Having it cost 2 runes would balance it out a lot more. You come to the end conclusion, all right, from the X number of people I asked, they all relatively said the same thing, where they feel that the rune cost should cost a little bit more. So then you upgrade it to 2. Same thing with the damage. Maybe one buddy said, I don't like how it does weapon damage, or I don't like how it heals for 2/3. I think it should be a constant number instead of a abnormal number, because you don't really see 2/3 often in Dungeons and Dragons, because 2/3 can equal decimals, where in my case I would always just round it up, but in other cases it may confuse players and they may disagree with that, so they go, why not just make it half? Well, half works out just fine. So maybe the end conclusion is, all right, let's just make it half the damage, you're healed. It is in other spells that involve healing, that is something that already exists, so it's something you can compare it with. So you get to the point where the text of what your abilities have done have been balanced for right now. Next, you move on to your path features. So your archetypes. This is what does each spec per se, which branch, which path your character goes on to make them different. So if you're making your character have a tank option, okay, well, they need abilities that can make them tanky. Does your character a healer? Okay, well, here's things to help healing. You don't want to overlap, so you don't want to give your guy focus in tanking all of these healing options unless they're base class, a natural ability. A good example of this is paladins. Paladins across the board get lay on hands, but if the paladin is branching into a different oath, they're not going to gain a healing ability if they're not branched for healing. A good example with that would be if they went the Oath of Devotion. With the Oath of Devotion, they are more focused on protection type spells. They're more focused on being able to free bonds and disadvantages, increase armor class, protect from good and evil spells. So you're not going to give them an extra heal with that. You're not going to give them the ability to use Cure Wounds. You're going to give them the ability to use Sanctuary. But since it's a paladin, at base kit they get lay on hands. So you want to make sure that you're not overlapping ideas like that. So once you've decided that, okay, this is what the 3 specs are going to do, you go back to what you just did in the previous step. You balance them. Hey buddy, does Marrow Strike sound good to you? Like, what do you think of it? Well, I think the term of exhaustion is a little bit too free loose. the idea of giving someone exhaustion is very big. Perhaps it should be harder to inflict because you only need 6 stacks of exhaustion to die. It's like, all right, what would you suggest? Well, how about you have it here that if they are hit twice with this ability, they get a stack of exhaustion. How about making it 3 times? With how long some fights can get, that seems a little bit more realistic. If you're hit 3 times and you meet the conditions, you get hit with exhaustion. You go through that again. I actually think that should cost 1 rune, because this is a archetype thing. It should be the least most powerful thing, so maybe it should cost cheaper. I think the Constitution saving throw is a little bit too low or a little bit too high. Things like that. Doing your edit and getting people to edit it for you. And when you come to a conclusion, you wrap it all up. So you put together the entire thing from start to finish. So at this point, you've found the tools you've needed. You have your books, you have your homebrewery, your character sheet, you have all that put together. So then you have created your level chart, explaining what's in the class. You've explained what the class does, what its stats are, what makes it unique. You've listed its class features and what its abilities do. You've had its abilities balanced on your end. You've had other people look at it. The last thing you have to do is you have to actually test it. And this is something that could take a long time. So to test it, you actually need a character sheet. And I have one right here. Oriana Sorrow Runewraith. This character currently being played by Dez in my Roll20 campaign. He's been on here before, and he is currently a level 12. He has spec'd into Blood. His past character was a Warlock who was slain in battle. So he has his stats. Now he has some magical improvements that have made him a lot stronger over time. But he has his base stat lines, he has his saving throws, and he has his skills. He got to retain, due to the nature, the way I designed the help balance the class, he retained previous skills from the Warlock, but he didn't retain everything. He has hit points. Being a tank, he naturally has more hit points. He has a high armor class. His hit dice is decently high. It should be a D10, but that's a little bit error on his side. And he has all of his abilities laid down. He has his Blood Boil, which we made be a DC 22 against NPCs and a 17 against players. Because he had a tendency to also fight players, it was incredibly hard for the players to succeed these saving throws. So we made one for different in case that was something that wanted to happen, being the nature of a Death Knight. He has all of his abilities listed down, and now it comes down to, alright, you have everything, well, let's test out the damage. The only way to really do that is you roll your ability. 22 damage at level 12. That's actually pretty good. Considering that if they fail the Constitution saving throw, they are also suffering from the effects. They take full damage are inflicted with the Blood Plague. Well, what's the Blood Plague do? Well, the Blood Plague is just a simple 2d6. So bam, he does another 10 damage at the end of that person's turn. And that's a continuous thing as long as he can keep reapplying it. Ability seems good. What next? Well, let's go back to the Death Strike. So let's look at the Death Strike here. How much damage can a normal Death Strike does? Well, he crit for 16 plus 5. That's 21 damage. That pretty much equals out with the Blood Boil, which is important because you don't want your archetype abilities to be so strong that you have no reason to use your baseline abilities. So the fact that the Death Strike here dealt just as much damage as the Blood Boil means that it has relevance. Not only does it heal you for 2/3 of the damage, but it also did the same amount as a Blood Boil does. And that's about 10 points in healing, which can be pretty good. It's nothing significant like a actual healer would apply, but it's something, especially if they're low on health. His initiative is all supposed to be -1. That's weird. He has his things listed in the cantrip section, just easier convenience. So let's look at the Mind Freeze. Well, 1 reaction, 30 feet, within range, costs 1 rune, it's an instantaneous, and there's the effect. So you kind of go through and really you then fight it. So I can pull up a quick minion right here. Let's go monsters. Well, let's fight a bullet. Let's get the bullet's character sheet up. So you got the bullet's character sheet, and you got this person. So you gotta test out the bullet strength. So I don't know, bullet bites them. So let's say the bullet hit, because the bullet's not going to hit this strong character at this late in the game. 22 damage. Does that impact the character severely? Well, 185 health, 1 attack, 22 damage. It's not too bad. So now the character is going to attack again. Let's say the character marrow strikes. And let's say the character hits. Well, part of the effect is the character has to make a strength check, an opposed strength check. The strength check, since it's a baseline check with no abilities, means it's a lot easier for a opponent to beat it. In this case, the bullet did beat it. However, hitting was able to hit for a decent amount of damage. So there you go. You have determined that Marrow Strike, after a few battles, is balanced. You do this with all of your abilities, and when you're confident that with the things that your campaign is going to be against, that the class is decent, it's not overpowered, it's not significantly stronger than the other classes, you're ready to actually release it and have your players play it. And then through their feedback and multiple game sessions, campaigns, you'll be able to make changes to balance the class to its final product. And this is how you create a custom class in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So to recap, what are you doing? Well, you're creating a class that is unique. It's something in the game that doesn't currently exist through conventional means. You're creating something that is different and interesting. You are explaining what it does, how it's different. You're explaining what stats it uses, any systems it has in place, such as rage or spells. You are listing its class with its abilities, where you share similarities with other classes, such as ability scores and features, archetypes. You are listing the class features, hit points, proficiencies, equipment. You're explaining the abilities of the spells. You have gotten other people to look at it and help balance it, so it's not just your eyes, so that way your mistakes that you can't see get pointed out and acknowledged and changed. You've listed your archetypes, so that way each archetype is different, so there's no real reason to go one archetype over the other two. There's a significant change in playstyle for every single one, and then you've actually tested it yourself and you've had other players test it, and that gives you your final result. This is a good example. We'll go to brews I've done and I'll show you what the old Death Knight used to look like here. So clearly a lot different, but in my case, we still have the same thing here. We still have what a Death Knight is, what it requires, prerequisites for it. We still go over the rune system, but you'll notice right away that the rune system has changed. The old one, we used to have every single roll gave a certain amount of runes, whereas compared to the new one, now actually 1 to 2 gives 0, 3 to 4, 2, 5, 6, 3, versus the old 2, 4, 6. We once again had the class features. Proficiency stayed the same. Our class doesn't specifically get ability scores, so we were able to replace ability scores with a different ability, but we still had the Path of Death feature. We actually did change, as you can see, abilities of where they get and when they get them. We've even changed some names, that way there wasn't so many blank spots here. We input the class feature. As you see here, we originally had it as 1d8 and we changed it to 1d10. The equipment stayed the same. Pretty much everything else stayed the same there. And then we went into balancing the abilities. So we did with blood. We went through and we decided at the time that Death and Decay should be a 30-foot radius that deals 40-12 damage at the start, end, or whenever they enter. Very powerful for a level 14th ability. So we changed that. And we changed it to, it is a 10-foot radius that deals 2d12 damage. This is a lot less damage for something at 14th level that still provides the same impact. And we did that with all three specs. Frost, we decided to apply the extra attack to both. We've edited Obliterate to make it more useful. We actually reduced the cost of it and gave it more damage, more ability to refund. Continue going through. We redesigned Unholy completely, where the old Unholy used various plagues to break down the enemy and just actually didn't do anything, to return into a more minion focused, which is a huge change in playstyle. Then, of course, we had the basic abilities, and this is where you can see the Mind Freeze. No, I don't have the old Mind Freeze on here, but we have all of our abilities here, and they have changed damage-wise compared to the other ones. But at the end of the day, we've gone through and we have two different PDFs that are about a month old from each other, and this one is still being changed. Like, I added the changes to Death and Decay just the other day. And it's continuously being tested as in the Storm King's Thunder group. And that's really where it ends. It's not a you have to specifically do this, because at the end of the day, it's your idea, your creation, you're choosing what to do. But the key thing to remember is it has to be unique. You don't want there to be something that already exists that people are going to want to use over it, because if it's a duplicate of something, why use this version when they can use that version? That version ends up working the same, if not better. You want it to share similarities with other classes as far as design-wise goes, such as the levels that you get archetype, the proficiency bonuses, and the general idea of a class. So like a melee class has these types of things that a spellcaster wouldn't, whereas a spellcaster has aspects that a melee player wouldn't. You want to make sure that your baseline abilities are just as impactful as your archetype abilities, so that way there's still reason to use them. You want to make sure that each archetype is significantly different from one another, so that way you don't have, well, I'm just going to play Blood all the time, because why would you go Frost? There's no point. Blood is superiorly better. By balancing them all, so that way they're all different in playstyle, but still do the same amount of damage, roughly, if that, then that provides opportunities. Well, I can be a Blood Death Knight, but I don't really want to be too melee focused. I kind of like the idea of using minions to kind of spread death around, so I'm going to run Unholy and see how that plays. And you continuously do that. Now, a good question to ask once you've done all this, and this is also something you should ask at the beginning, is this idea fit for a class? Because sometimes you'll have an idea and it'll sound great, but when you get to the end result, you'll realize this makes a lot more sense if it's just an archetype. And pretty much then you just, alright, and you take everything, you condense, you take the good points of it and you make it into an archetype, which is something completely different that is still equally as difficult. So, creating a custom class. That's all you really have to do about it, and by following those steps, should be just easy. So have a nice day.